This is the Moza KS Pro, a wheel that, at first sight, had me in awe at the value proposition. A great looking wheel with plenty of inputs, a screen and backlit rotaries, all for $329 US. There's got to be a catch, right? Well, after spending some time with it, coming from the original KS and also using wheels like the FSR2, I think I figured out exactly where this wheel sits, and more importantly, who it's actually for. Now, straight away, if you've seen my review on the original KS, this is very clearly not just a small refresh. This is Moza taking that same formula and just cranking it up a notch, and in some areas actually fixing things I didn't even realize needed fixing. You still get that familiar 300mm GT style layout, the same general shape, and a very similar ergonomic design. This time, things feel a bit more intentional, and honestly that starts from the second you open the box. The unboxing experience is genuinely really premium. Everything is packaged nicely, well protected, and Moza have included a set of really high quality stickers that you can place on any of the buttons, with the RGB lights shining through them as well, which is such a nice touch and makes setting up the wheel feel way more personal. It's one of those smaller things that you don't really think about, but when you actually sit there setting it up, it just adds to the whole experience. The construction itself has also been improved, now featuring a carbon fiber reinforced front plate, and overall the wheel feels just way more solid in the hands compared to the KS. And then the big addition. Right in the center, you've now got a 2.99-inch HD display. Now, compared to something like the FSR2, yeah, it's smaller, and you're not getting that full flagship feel. But honestly, at this price point, the fact that it's even here is kind of mad. It feels less like a gimmick, and more like a scaled down version of what you'd find on something way more expensive. Surrounding that screen, you've got a ton of RGB backlit buttons, and now, backlit rotaries. And everything on this wheel feels incredibly tactile. The buttons have that same satisfying click as the KS, but somehow even more refined. And that carries across everything. The rotaries, the dials, the encoders, all of it feels deliberate and well thought out. It doesn't feel like anything was just thrown on for the sake of it. Everything has a purpose, and you can actually feel that while using it. And then turning around to the back, the magnetic paddles. These are easily one of the highlights. They've got that really satisfying and solid thunk to them, with no weird vibrations or flex, just clean, consistent actuation every time. You've also still got dual clutch paddles and Moza's metal quick release, which again is one of the best out there. No flex, no play, just solid. Now, just like with pretty much every Moza product, a huge part of the experience comes down to the software. And once again, Pithouse delivers. Everything on this wheel can be customized. The screen, the rev lights, button colors, rotary behavior, all of it. And now even the backlit rotaries themselves. You can actually set a different color for the active selection and a separate color for the background, which is such a small detail, but makes everything look way cleaner and easier to read mid-race, not to mention the creative opportunities that it opens. And it also makes it way easier to build muscle memory because you can visually separate what you're actually adjusting at a glance. And with the addition of the screen, you also get access to Moza's Dash Display Editor. Now, I already talked about this in my FSR2 review, and while it's still not quite on the level of SimHub, it's getting very close. Personally, I've been running a custom replica style dash that I made based on the Mercedes GT3, and it's been great. Everything from delta to gear to brake bias is right there, and the rev lights on the outside are also really bright and clean, making them super easy to read even in intense moments. And because the screen is right in your line of sight, I actually found myself relying on it more than I expected, especially compared to the KS where everything is still in-game. And once it's set up, it just works. No messing around every time you launch a sim, it's just consistent. Now, speaking of things that just work, this incredibly smooth transition into asking you to subscribe. We're getting closer and closer to 2,000 subscribers. So if you do enjoy these reviews, it takes like 1 second, it's completely free, and it helps me out a ton. Right, so how does the KS Pro actually feel out on track? And honestly, this is where it really surprised me, because just like the original KS, this doesn't feel like a budget wheel, not even close. The 300mm size still makes it super versatile. I've used this across GT3, GT4, TCR, even some prototypes, and it just works everywhere. But the biggest difference for me was the overall feel of the wheel. The grips feel more intentional this time around. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still not the biggest fan of the little bump on the backside. Over time, I've definitely grown to accept it, and it's one of those things where after a few sessions, you kind of just stop noticing it altogether. And overall, everything just feels more thought out, from the shape to the materials to how your hands naturally sit on the wheel. It all comes together really nicely. And just like the KS, the grips still do a great job of keeping your hands icy cool without leaving any weird residue behind. Now, where this really separates itself is the immersion. With the screen, the lighting, the extra inputs, I've genuinely found myself more immersed in the sim, to the point where, especially driving at night with the lights off, there were moments where I just completely forgot I was even on a sim. Everything felt right. And that's something I didn't really get as much with the original KS. Not because it was bad, but more so because you're still relying on the game itself rather than the wheel. Here, the wheel becomes more of the experience. And having all of that information directly on the wheel, Delta, rev lights, car data, means you're relying way less on the in-game HUD, which just adds to that immersion even more. And despite having more going on, it never feels cluttered. Everything is still within reach, still logical, and still easy to use while driving. But like I said at the start, there has to be a catch. And honestly, it's not one big issue, it's more so where this sits. Because the original KS is still a fantastic wheel, and now it's actually gotten cheaper, going from around $279 down closer to around $250 in some places, which makes it even more of a ridiculous value. And that's where things get interesting. Because now the KS Pro sits in this middle ground where, yes, you're getting more features, more immersion, more functionality, but you're also paying that bit extra. And I think this is one of those decisions that really depends on what you value more. If you just want something that works and gives you everything you need, the KS is still incredible. But if you care about immersion, customization, and having that extra layer of interaction while driving, this starts to make way more sense. And while the build and price of the KS Pro are genuinely really good, honestly so good that Moza kind of had to make the original KS cheaper to keep it competitive, it does raise the question: do you go for insane value, or do you spend a bit more for the full experience? So, what do I actually think about the Moza KS Pro? Well, I think this is one of the most interesting wheels Moza has released in a while, because it takes everything that made the KS great and just does it better. More inputs, more immersion, more functionality, without completely jumping into high-end pricing. If you already own the KS, this probably isn't a must upgrade. But if you're choosing between the two, this is where things get very tempting, because this feels like a proper next step wheel without needing to spend double the money. And honestly, that's a very, very good place to be. Thank you all for watching. Huge thanks to everyone supporting the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.